Well, it took me a little longer today to do a video. I had a rough night last night. My temperature was between 103 and 104 and had a hard time getting it back down to where it needed to be. I got the the radical chemo that is scheduled for the third day. The third day after the transplant, and so I'm kind of struggling with all of that. I did read through the Bible this morning, and I was reading Mark 12 and 13, and I had a thought for the day, and the thought really is the criticality of reading Scripture rightly. If you don't, you can easily be fooled into thinking that Jesus is a false apocalyptic prophet. I forget who was it that said, why I'm not a Christian.
Bart Ehrman?
If you find out, let me know.
Bart Ehrman?
I think it was Albert Schweitzer, but I'm not sure. At any rate, he said he was not a Christian because Jesus was a false apocalyptic prophet. The reason he thought Jesus was a false apocalyptic prophet is he thought that Jesus in Mark 13 and Matthew 24 was talking about the end of the world, and that the end of the world would come in 40 years, and that didn't happen. So there's no. Was it Albert Schweitzer?
Bertrand Russell.
Oh, Bertrand Russell, of course. Yeah, why I'm not a Christian, Bertrand Russell. I think Albert Schweitzer said something similar. And of course, there are many like them in the modern world. Bart Ehrman says there's no way of getting around it. Jesus was a false apocalyptic prophet. But the problem is they have never learned to read the Bible in light of the Bible. So if you read the Old Testament, you see that phrases like the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Those phrases are used by the Old Testament prophets to talk about the overthrow of nations. So in Isaiah 13, at least I think it's Isaiah 13, that phrase is used with respect to the Medes and the Persians overthrowing the Babylonian Empire. So Jesus, the heir to the linguistic riches of the Old Testament prophets and a far greater prophet than them all, uses their language to talk about the destruction of Jerusalem. Again, he's not talking about the end of the world. He's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Previously, he had been going through the temple and had declared Ichabod on the temple. In Daniel, the temple was going to be desecrated by the Old Testament Antichrist. In the New Testament, the temple is going to be manifestly destroyed. So Jesus has walked through the temple grounds, and he's walking away, and then his disciples call his attention to its buildings, and they say, "See all these things, I tell you the truth, not one stone here will be left on another, everyone will be thrown down." And the disciples, of course, had questions. When will this happen? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? And then Jesus gives them a lot of forewarnings, a lot of things that are going to happen. And you have to realize the momentous nature of this, because the temple in Jerusalem was the epicenter of their lives. sort of like someone saying that Washington, D.C. will be destroyed. That would really shake us up. Well, that's what Jesus is saying, and he's saying it's going to happen within a generation. And of course, that is exactly what happened in AD 70 when the temple was manifestly destroyed and never rebuilt again. The need for a temple was fleeting. And why is that? That is because we are the temple of God. We're living stones in the temple of God. So we are the new temple of God. And Jesus is forever the cornerstone. So we don't go back to luminous limestone and glistening gold. No, it is the people of God that are the temple of God. There are a lot of metaphors in the scripture for that. So my point, I suppose, is that it is critical to read the Bible rightly. Otherwise, if you don't, you will suppose that Jesus didn't know what he was talking about. And, there's a lot of these leaders in this generation and the last that are making that point. There's no way of getting around it. Jesus was wrong. He was talking about the end of the world within 40 years. It didn't happen. And in truth, the problem is they don't know how to read the Bible in light of the Bible. And this is one of the great principles of biblical interpretation. We have to look at the scriptures in light of the scriptures. And when we do, it all makes sense. Well, they told me I would be pretty loopy today because of the drugs that I have taken. So if I sound loopy, sorry. But yeah, I struggled last night. I shook so hard my hips hurt. And my temperature as I speak is 103.2. And I just had a popsicle trying to cool myself down. But I actually really appreciate the fact that that I'm not shaking. I'm not shivering. So I'll sweat any day over shaking like that. So, well, as always, God gives you the grace you need when you need it, and oftentimes not a moment before. The chemotherapy is pretty intense. It can make your bladder bleed, so that when you urinate, you have blood coming out of your bladder. And yeah, I hope they can get the temperature under control. I think they'll be able to. This is, of course, part of what I talked about before, the war within. I must decrease, and he must increase. This is obviously using a text as a point of departure, but, that's what John the Baptist said, as I mentioned, I think yesterday, about Jesus. He must increase, I must decrease. And in my case, I have to lose the battle in the sense that Paul Stephen takes over 100% of my immune system and my blood system. Right now, my absolute neutrophil count is not measurable, so it's 0. My white blood cell count is 0.3, so I'm in sort of a dangerous situation in terms of getting sick, but the Lord always provides, and I have peace in the midst of this storm. Now, it's the song, though Satan should buffet, though trials should come, But this blessed assurance control, that Christ has regarded my helpless estate, has shed his own blood for my soul. So we can say it is well with my soul. If that's true, we're in good shape. Well, I've got a lot of my family members in here. Christina, David, and Emily. Emily is with child. We call the baby Shmush. Long story behind that. My son Hank was quite a incredible individual, and I'm so proud of what Christina is doing. She's helping the homeless, and as a lot of people have said about her, she's not a flyby. She invests herself in the whole of the people that she's helping, and yeah, this always reminds me that if we give the cup of cold water and the piece of bread in his name, we're doing it unto him. And I always feel like I get brownie points for my kids because they're doing that on my behalf. So Christina's friend Monica said that my legacy lives on through my children. Well, I hope I have a better night tonight. And I just wanted to do a video today. I didn't want to miss a day. So I hope this has been helpful to you. And if I was completely incoherent, you'll know why. Thank you for your prayers and for your support. I don't know what I would do without them. I don't know how non-believers or unbelievers deal with these kinds of situations. So long for now. Again, thank you for your prayers and support.